Today we're going to make one of Japan's most simple but satisfying dishes, soba. I'm Cassie, and in my kitchen in the suburbs of Japan, today we're going to make Toshikoshi Soba. Toshikoshi means the end of the year or the passing of the year, and soba refers to a buckwheat noodle. Although I'm showing this to you as an end of year or New Year's dish, this is something that many people eat throughout the year, including myself, so don't let this stop you from making it whenever you want to. A couple of the meanings behind it being a New Year's dish is because the noodles are long and they represent a long and healthy life. They're also very easily bitten into, so it's kind of like cutting away the misfortune of the previous year and making way for less misfortune for the coming year. There are loads of different ways to eat soba in general. People put loads of different toppings on them, put different soups with them. Sometimes you can find them in a kind of place of ramen. And there are even loads of different ways to eat Toshikoshi Soba. These are some of the most common toppings that people will put on their soba noodles if they're making them at home. Today we're going to be making the stock from scratch, and I'll also be putting up a video about the 3 basic Japanese stocks. And that might sound a bit daunting, but you're going to see just how easy it is to make this type of stock. Although the entire process of making this soba dish is not too difficult, seeing as we're not making the soba noodles from scratch, there might be a few ingredients that you're unfamiliar with. So let's take a look at those now. So first up, for the soba soup, we're going to make our own little dashi broth. Soon I'll be posting a video about the 3 main types of dashi broth, but today we're going to make a type of awase dashi, which basically just means a combination of different broths. So for that we're going to need our kombu, which is a type of seaweed. And this comes with some white powder on it, which you want to keep on because that's actually kind of a base of its flavour. Then to that we're going to add our Katsuobushi, which is a type of dried fish flake. If you are vegetarian, you can omit the fish flakes and just do a kombu dashi. Then to that we're going to add our 3 mainstay ingredients of Japanese food, which is soy sauce, mirin and sake. We are using a cooking sake. Sometimes that can be a little bit hard to find abroad, so if you can't find it, you don't need to use a special fancy sake, you can just omit it. I'll also be adding a teaspoon of white sugar. This is a non-traditional ingredient, but I do find that it just brings out the flavours of everything else quite nicely. And of course we need some soba. We're just going to be using this dried soba. Making soba from scratch is very difficult and it takes a lot of time and practice, so we're not going to be making that today. Then next up, for the toppings, there might be a few things that you're a little bit unfamiliar with here. First off is the one that you probably are familiar with, which is the spring onion. I'm using this kind of weird mix between a spring onion and a leek or a green onion, but you can just use a normal spring onion. So first up of those slightly unfamiliar ingredients is the wakame. This is another type of seaweed, and basically it's just another species of kelp or algae compared to the kombu. However, the wakame doesn't hold up as well in hot water and it will become very slimy a lot more quickly, and also they're sold in much smaller pieces, so you're not going to get as flavorful a dashi broth as you would with the kombu. Next up is the Kamaboko or fish cake. I looked up how this is made and it's basically just a fish paste that you then kind of steam and then cool down and set. There are different types. This one that I see the most often is this one with a kind of pink outer layer, but some you often see with just the white. Again, if you are vegetarian, you can just omit this fish cake, or if you just can't find it. And lastly, we have some shichimi. This shichimi is a kind of special one that I found in a place called Tsukuba, which has some kind of mikan in it, which is a sort of orangey tangerine in there. So it has a bit of a citrusy flavour to it, but you can just use any kind of normal shichimi or even ichimi that you can find. And that's just a topping, so you don't need to put it on if you can't find it or you don't want it. So now let's get on to making our soup. We're going to do this by soaking our kombu. You can soak this for 30 minutes or up to overnight. And of course, the longer that you soak it, the more flavour that you're going to get out. Now that our kombu has finished soaking, we're going to bring it to a boil. And we're going to do this slowly on a low heat so that we get out as much flavour as possible. As soon as it gets to boiling, we want to take out the kombu. If you leave the kombu in any longer, then it will get very slimy and bitter and the dashi will not taste good. Once you've removed the kombu, you can add your katsuo fish flakes. Then we're just going to simmer that for about 10 to 30 seconds. Then switch it off and leave it to steep for about 10 minutes. Now that this has been steeping for 10 minutes, we're going to strain it through a sieve into a heat-proof container. Now we're going to add our soy sauce, mirin, sake, and sugar. And then we're going to put that straight back onto the hob and we're going to bring it just to a boil just to heat it through. Now we're going to get our toppings ready. So first up, we're going to thinly slice our spring onion. Remember, this is just a topping, so you don't want to do it too thick or it's going to have a bit too much of a bite. Then we're going to prepare our Kamaboko fish cake. This usually comes on a block of wood like this, and usually I just peel it off, but you can also slice it off. And just slice this into whatever thickness you prefer. It's a little bit chewy and also a little bit sweet almost, so just maybe give it a taste before you cut it into a really thick chunk that you're going to have in your soba noodles. Then we're just going to rehydrate this wakame seaweed. Often I'm pretty lazy with this and I'll just put it straight into the soup once I put it into my bowl. I don't actually always rehydrate it like this separately, but it does mean that you don't have to wait for it to rehydrate whilst it's just sitting in your noodle soup. So simply put them into water for 3 minutes and let them soak, and then you can just take them out. Then we're going to cook our soba noodles. When you buy soba dried like this, they vary quite wildly from package to package, so you'll just have to look at the back for the instructions and cook time. If it starts to foam a lot like this, then turn down your heat. Then once you've cooked those, we're going to rinse them in cold water to remove some of the starch and stop them from sticking together. Our broth is going to be warm, so you don't need to worry about it being too cold. If that's taken you a bit of time, then you might find that you just need to reheat your broth, but that's fine. Just bring it to a boil like before and just let it heat through. And then just serve it with all of your toppings. Soba is such a typical Japanese dish. It's mild in flavour and it's light, but it warms you up, and it's the perfect healthy dish to eat after all of the unhealthy meals of winter. When I'm looking for something light and not too difficult, this is my go-to. Happy New Year, and I hope that you enjoy this year-round too. That's it for this week. I'll see you next Sunday.